the dark, dark tomb there was a dark, dark street, and in the dark, dark street there was a dark, dark office. In the dark, dark office there were some dark, dark stairs, and down the dark, dark stairs there was a dark, dark room, and in the dark, dark room was where the worst wrestling tropes go to die.
Hello, I'm Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic Wrestling, and welcome to the latest thrilling installment of Straight to Hell, which, of course, by the way, if you are new here down in hell, is the show where my illustrious guest, they offer up a list of their pet peeves from the world of professional wrestling, and that list of pet peeves, it gets sent down to hell to rot for the rest of eternity. Joining us today is the big dog, the biggest of all the dogs, the largest canine in the world of professional wrestling journalism. He also dabbles with a bit of MMA, a bit of boxing over at Fightful. It is, of course, Sean Ross Sapp. He has all of the scopes, and he's in hell right now. Over to Sean and Ross. Sean Ross Sapp, arguably the most anticipated guest in Straight to Hell history.
No.
How the hell are you doing?
I'm doing good. It means a lot. I get these comments on Twitter every once in a while. It's like, when are you going to do Straight to Hell? When are you going to do Straight to Hell? By God, I'm here right now.
That's what we do here. On Wrestling YouTube, we just put smiles on people's faces all of the time. But of course, you are well known as being the guy who asks all of the hard questions in the world of professional wrestling at the moment. So I've got to ask a big one for you. As I'm sat here, my first name, Ross, what's it like having Ross as a middle name? Because it's unprecedented.
It's funny. I never used my middle name. Like, I hated my middle name for so long. And I really did. I hated my middle name for so long. And then professionally, I was like, well, I don't want to just go by Sean Sapp. So if anybody calls me Sean Sapp, they either don't know me at all or they've known me for like since I was a little kid and I actually used it. But I never really used it before like 10 years ago.
To be fair, Sean Sapp is a journalist name, like Sean Snap, even reporting.
I hate it.
Very snappy.
Now that it's been Sean Ross Sapp for so long, like I just go by that everywhere now. Now, like, people that meet me completely outside of wrestling, they know my full name now. So yeah, but forever, like, I think I even told people in elementary school, I was like, I don't have a middle name.
What's wrong with Ross? Do you know just like how blunt it is? Ross.
Well, I think back then it was in the middle when like Friends was on NBC and it was always like, oh, where's Rachel, Ross? And I was like, oh, I get it. Yeah, thanks.
I never
heard that one.
I never got that because I'm just really, really ugly. But while we're here, what's it like? What's your reaction, to the big news of David Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston? We might as well go on there. It's the big topic of the day.
Well, it's funny. I didn't see that until like as we're filming this yesterday. I was looking through something and I came across an old National Enquirer article about Rey Mysterio and Jennifer Aniston being rumored to have been dating, and that it wasn't true whatsoever. And then like an hour after that, I saw the David Schwimmer Jennifer Aniston thing, and I was like, oh man, like I caught that at the right time. Or maybe subconsciously I did see it, and that's what made me think of the Rey Mysterio Jennifer Aniston thing. But I have no thoughts whatsoever.
Oh, it fit a lovely warm fire inside of my being yesterday when I saw it yesterday. But if it does nothing for you, that's fair enough. I'm going to come at you now with a really broad and potentially quite stupid question, because in my opinion, and I've got no qualms just kissing your ass here today, Sean. You are the top dog now. Yeah, you are the top dog now in professional wrestling journalism. Meltzer has been knocked off his perch by Sean Ross Sapp. How does one become the top dog in the world of professional wrestling? That is a broad and silly question. Man. I do concede.
It is broad, and I mean, what I specialize in specifically is breaking news and maybe doing some interviews, but it's really breaking news. And I don't know. I mean, a few years ago, I had maybe one connection, and then it kind of snowballed. Definitely word of mouth, people that I talk to, letting other people know that I want to get things right. That's the most important thing to me. When I was looking at the landscape and all that, there were a lot of great people that were doing, like Dave Meltzer's really good, Mike Johnson's really good, Ryan Satin was doing it when I started breaking news. I was like, well, I think there's still room here, and there's plenty of room. As we've seen, like, there are more people breaking news than ever before, and I just wanted my accuracy to be as high as possible. And if for some reason I reported something that ended up being wrong, I wanted to have like sort of evidence that, well, this was supposed to happen, because I know that a lot of people lean on that well, they always say plans change. Well, they do very, very often. I've gotten physical scripts at 8 p.m. Eastern, and by 8:15, there's stuff on there that has changed. So just it all starts with making sure that you're accurate, and then it kind of snowballs from there. Once one person realizes, oh, he's willing to reach out to me for a story. That's how I've cultivated a lot of sources. It's just, if I'm writing about somebody, I'll reach out to them, and sometimes they appreciate it, sometimes they don't appreciate it, and it kind of goes from there. But that's personally how it worked for me.
And it's especially sort of incredible the sort of rise Fightful and yourself have had over the past few years when you think about how sort of habitual wrestling news consumption is, the way you've sort of like muscled your way at the top with all these established sites that have been around for so many years and decades in some cases.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. I didn't want to do like the paywall or anything. Like that was a thing I was so against. I was like, we've been giving people this stuff for free for a year and a half. But I can't argue with results. Our writers get paid better. They're taken care of better. And that's ultimately what we wanted to do, was kind of disrupt the wrestling news space and do something completely different. And it's worked out really, really well. And it means a lot when the talent or even the people at the top of the companies are willing to come to me and say, this is what's going on. This is how I feel about it. Because that's a lot of what we do. Like, I'll take the temperature of a situation more than I'll necessarily be like, this is the creative plan. Because for us, like, revealing creative plans isn't usually the most like fruitful thing, because they change so much. Obviously stuff like CM Punk and Adam Cole and contract negotiations are big, but we take the temperature of a situation an awful lot, and that leads to other people kind of chiming in, and we get their thoughts as well.
So how does it, if you had to put a percentage on it, when it comes to sourcing a story, what percent is it wrestlers coming to you, and what percent is it you getting a tip off maybe, and then pursuing wrestlers to try and find the truth?
I'd say it's probably 60-40, leaning towards me reaching out to them. But I mean, there definitely are some, and I mean, there are some where they're like, I know something big, but I can't tell you. And I feel like they know that within like an hour or two, I'm going to come back to them and be like, I found out what that big thing was. Sometimes I just got to know that something big is coming, and then I'll kind of track it down, because we do have a wide array of sources across multiple companies. But I mean, there are some people that won't be clued in at all on some of this big stuff, some of the little stuff. So it's very important to kind of expand that. And then there's like some wrestlers that'll just be like, hey, I don't necessarily have time to catch up on the Twitter discourse or the articles. Can you give me like a brief rundown of what's going on? Which sometimes is easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The CM Punk stuff, how does that start? Because that has obviously been rumor, innuendo, whatever you want to call it, for 10 years now, and you have been at the forefront of this snowball of a story over the past month or so. How did that start, without obviously revealing sources? Because I know you can't do that because you're a lovely journalist.
I can't, and it was more widely known than what AEW thought, and it wasn't known by many in AEW, if anybody. But I do know that there was another media member in early July who was poking around and asking Tony Khan about it. Now, the thing is, that person said, hey, I've heard that CM Punk is signed. Can you dispute that? And Tony said, yeah, I can dispute it. Well, that's because he hadn't signed. So Tony was being honest with him, but he hadn't signed. Well, what I had heard, like maybe a day or two after this person had asked him that, and I didn't know this yet, but somebody said, I was talking to them about something completely separate related to sports in the Chicago area. They're like, hey, you need to check on CM Punk going to AEW. And I rolled my eyes and I was like, yeah, right, whatever. And I was like, as if. And then the next day, I thought of something that happened 2 years ago before the pandemic. I was at a Comic-Con with one of my friends, and I went there like just as a fan, and it was for an Edge and Christian Q&A. At this point, Edge had been out of the ring for 8 years, was never going to wrestle again. Christian had been out of the ring for 5 years, was never going to wrestle again. And somebody said, hey, would you all ever consider going to AEW and wrestling? And a bunch of people snickered and laughed that person out of the building. And then I thought back to that, and I was like, what are those two doing right now? It's like one of them's in AEW wrestling. The other one's in WWE wrestling. I was like, and everybody thought about that question and they thought, what a joke. And that's how I like felt when I heard the CM Punk thing. It's like, maybe I should look into this. And then I did. And someone said, well, how did you hear that? And I couldn't tell them. Then went to another source that I thought would know. They didn't know, but then they were like, well, that would make an awful lot of sense. And then finally I got a confirmation close to one of the sides, and that snowballed things. And then a lot of more people started talking about it. But then you hear stories about how he looks in training and how they've had talks before. And once you find out one piece of information, it really snowballs, and people are willing to talk more about what they know when you realize you know something that maybe you're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm. And when are you going to find out how he's going to debut on Rampage?
Oh, I won't. I remember when Sting walked out, I got a text message from backstage, and this is when AEW and NXT were going head to head. And these wrestlers, staff members, crew members, they know I'm going to watch both shows anyway. But I had one that said, turn on TNT right now. And then Sting walked out. Like sometimes I'll find out, sometimes I find out after everybody does, because I'm watching the other show and I've got to flip back over. But there are some things like that just get kept really well secret, and other things that don't. There are sometimes, like, I heard about the Goldberg thing, heard about him coming back. Mm-hmm. I reach out to somebody within WWE and they're like, yep, he sure is. And I feel like, my personal hunch, like I feel like they wanted people to know, like you better watch Monday type of thing. So it really depends.
And is that just with WWE being such a bigger operation that maybe they've got more sources that they can't just, like a memo essentially, don't tell anybody this, we don't want anybody to know, whereas AEW obviously a lot smaller, I guess, in terms of WWE, and their sources maybe are a lot more tuned in and in sync with one another, keeping things a secret and stuff like that. So
secrets are definitely more protected in AEW, and that's because they've cultivated that environment of don't leak stuff. And you know what? Nobody there owes me information. Nobody. If I'm reaching out to somebody and they can't give me info, they know I'm not going to hold it against them. I'm not going to be like boo-boo faced over it. I owe our readers information and our viewers information, but nobody in AEW, WWE, or really anywhere owes me information. So AEW does protect them a little bit better, but as people have seen, as they go on the road, that's just changing. It's never going to be completely sealed tight secret. I know there are some people that don't like that type of stuff. That's your prerogative. But WWE is a bigger company. They've got like 4 or 5 different brands and hundreds of people, although now they've got about 100 less people than they did last year, which sucks. But I mean, that's just the nature of it. There will always be somebody, even if they don't even realize they're giving up information, that kind of are.
And obviously, I guess this will come with a lot more experience. I'm speaking to you because I'm actually a qualified journalist, believe it or not, Sean. But I sold my soul to the YouTube devil and disregarded myself from a professional standpoint many moons ago. But in terms of when you're fishing for, I say fishing, that's a dirty word.
I fish for stories all the time. I fish for stories, yeah.
Have you grown to realize when someone is selling you down the river, when someone's just telling you a lie just to try and catch you out?
Yes, and it almost never happens anymore. It never happens from wrestlers or staff or anybody in the company, because it just doesn't. Now, the way that I say it, and I mean this in a complimentary way, I'm talking to the best liars in the world, meaning that they go out in front of 20,000 people and make you think they're hurt, make you think they're not hurt when they are hurt, make you think they're sad, happy, all that stuff. So, I have to decipher what of this might be political, what might be their agenda, any of that number of things. But I don't really get that. I get that more from people that are making an effort to like feed me information from the outside of wrestling. But there are some stuff that I have written off. Like there was a guy that was like, hey, my dad just drove The Undertaker in a limo to an airport. He's going to be in Saudi Arabia. He's wrestling AJ Styles this Friday. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then somebody saying, Ricky Morton will not shut up at this grocery store about going into the Hall of Fame. And I'm like, okay, pal. Like, and that's like before the last year, I learned to completely dismiss almost all that. Now there's so many wrestlers, there's so many companies, there's so many people associated with these individual things, I try to follow up on almost every lead, but it almost never comes from like people working me within wrestling, because quite frankly, if I'm talking to them, like I'm aware of who they are, I'm aware of who they're connected to, and we probably got like some sort of professional rapport established.
Yeah. How sick do you get of being told by just strangers that you're on somebody's payroll?
It used to be annoying, but now not so much. Like it's just like one of our moderators screenshotted like all the different payrolls I was on, and they sent them to me, and it's like AEW, NWA, Impact, WWE. It's every single one. So then when somebody says that, I can screenshot the opposite one and say, okay, please tell this person they're absolutely wrong. Please message this person and say, no, he's on this payroll.
And has anything like that ever been thrown at you? Have you ever been approached by a company saying, there's a certain story doing the rounds, doing the rumors, can you just not report this until it happens? Please, 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 we'll give you some money, stop.
No, never money. I have been asked to embargo information for sure. That's common. Like people will tell me, sorry, as you hear my background, I live in a small town and a tornado siren goes off every day.
Terrifying.
It's just so they're like, it's noon. But no, I've never been offered money to not report something at all. I take high level information to some of the top people in each company. I'm like, listen, I know about this. I would love to get a confirmation or denial on it. Sometimes I'll get one, sometimes I won't, but I've never been offered money, anything like that. Like if I do wrestling or announcing or anything like that for an independent promotion, I don't accept money. They can donate to like a charity or something like that in lieu of that. But I will not take money from an MMA company, pro wrestling company, anything like that.
Hypothetically, though, if they were like, here is a massive wad of cash, is that still going to charity or is that going to your back pocket?
Well, it depends on the situation. Well, for example, like a lot of people thought I got paid. I did a haircut thing where I donated my hair, and we did it with Awesome Kong and Mel and the Nightmare Collective. I didn't get paid for that. I got a comp seat at the show per usual for media. They did not pay for the terrible nachos that I ate at that AEW Dynamite. Like there was no pay there. Paid for my own fare to get there, paid for my own hotel. I don't know. That's one of those things where it's like money isn't as important as me enjoying what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, that's just, we do enough things, like we do enough charitable type of things to where I'd feel comfortable rejecting anything that they could throw my way.
So there you go. That's that rumor. If it ever was a rumor, that accusation just squashed straight away. Stop saying it to Sean, will you?
I did have people asking me that, like, seriously and genuinely when AEW started. They're like, how many of these people are consulting for AEW? And now I think enough people that fairly watch AEW can see, what on earth would they need me to consult them for? They're putting on a really good show.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that anybody in WWE hasn't told Vince McMahon that I could possibly put forth. Like people in the company know the issues. Same with Impact, same with ROH. Like these are very smart wrestling minds, and I get to learn from them when I talk to them, when I interview them, when I look for stories. But there were people that were genuinely like, would you do this? And I'm like, no, I would not. Absolutely not.
And just finally, how much does news aggregation sites like Cultaholic Wrestling annoy the tits off you?
They don't, because that's where I start. Well, I didn't start there. I started in column writing, but I did that for so long. So, I mean, I know it's necessary and it happens. Once you post news, it's out there. Now, I don't necessarily like it when people just like screenshot it, throw it on Twitter or Reddit. Quite frankly, I would rather a Wrestling Inc., a Cultaholic, I'd rather them monetize it, make money off of it. Because that's where I've been. I've been at the point to where I was checking my bank account before I ordered pizza and made sure I could survive and all that. It doesn't really bother me. I do like maybe a 15, 20-minute window is nice. But quite frankly, when news is out there, it's out there.
You're a wholesome guy, Sean. I was expecting a very different answer there. I've
So
seen
it's
your
fun.
Twitter game.
Well, I'll never go at people on Twitter unless they go at me first. Or unless they're just an outright jerk. Not just necessarily to me. If they're an outright jerk to somebody else for no reason, if they're like LMAO, that person got fired, LOL, this person got injured, I'm like, that's like, why are you doing that? Like, that's so weird. Like, it's okay. Like, I try not to go at individuals unless they absolutely deserve it and they're bad people. And I've got a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, he's so snippy on Twitter. Trace the thread, my friends. Go back, look at the tweet that got quote tweeted. They're not nice people if I'm doing that.
I think the saying is tit for tat, isn't it? And that's fair enough.
There you go.
There we go. So, Sean, that's all the questions about journalism. In fact, I've got one more because I got my I don't know if you heard about NCTJ over here in the UK. It's the big qualification thing. It's what you need to become a journalist. I've got that, right? I've got it all. I've got media law. I've got everything. And I need to know how you build a contact book, because that is one thing in my fledgling, like very, very small journalism career, which went away before YouTube. I could never work out how to do it, how to probably build a proper contacts book.
I'll tell you how it happened for me. When I didn't break as much news, I was like, you know what? I'm going to interview anybody and everybody I can get a hold of. There were a lot of people that are now at their heights again that I interviewed at their lowest points. We kept in touch. When people know that you care about them at their lowest points or before they've reached their highest points, generally they don't forget that. I'll never, ever forget how people treat me, ever. And a lot of other people are the same way. If you have like a really, really negative experience with somebody, you're probably not going to forget that. And that I've been very fortunate in that regard, that a lot of the contacts that I've made, I came to know before they hit it big, or when kind of they were in a downturn in their career, and they don't forget that.
There you go. Aspiring journalists, that's how it's done. But of course, we are here to do some Straight to Hell, which of course is the show.
Oh, man.
Where the illustrious guest, who this week is Sean Ross Sapp, will send 5 things that he hates about professional wrestling straight to hell to rot for the rest of eternity. So what is your first offering, please, Sean?
Oh, my gosh. So it's like half serious, half joking, because when people are like, you're really getting mad over this? I'm like, no, I don't get mad over pro wrestling at this point. But the constant rematches that I see in WWE, I loathe that. Like, much of the last decade, I've covered UFC, and so much of it is the big fight feel of they're finally going to hit each other. They're finally going to hit each other. Well, in WWE, they hit each other every single week before the pay-per-view. So I'm like, oh, man.
I was going to say this is a problem that's got worse and worse over the years, but it's always been there as long as I've been covering pro wrestling for a living for the past 5 years or whatever. But a lot of reports we read was all just maybe the sort of feeling we got from watching Raw, especially in the pandemic era, is that don't worry, everybody, they're just waiting until the pandemic's over. Well, the Thunderdome era is over. Fans are back in the arena. Yes. Then they'll start doing fresh things each and every week. Was that ever sort of mentioned to you by any sort of source or anything?
You better believe it was. And you know what I said to them? I said, I don't buy it. Yeah. Because you all tell me this after every WrestleMania, every draft, every superstar shakeup, when they get into the Thunderdome, when they get out of the Thunderdome. I hear it all the time. Oh, well, once they do this, once they do that. No, it ain't changing. It's not getting any better. And that was actually my second thing, was excusing lazy booking. People, like, for example, Nikki Ash, Rhea Ripley. Say one of them beat the other person and they're building towards a big pay-per-view match. And I'll be like, man, really wish they wouldn't have done that. Somebody would be like, oh, you'd rather they just have Nikki Ash lose? And I'm like, no, I'd rather they not book it. It's a scripted show. Yeah. They decide who wrestles and who wins and who loses. They get to decide. If the UFC could decide who wins before, they would have so many megastars.
I'll tell you what I miss, and it came back just when the brand split happened back in 2016. I remember the summer of 2016, squash matches became a thing again on Raw, quite often, especially for Nia Jax. I remember Braun Strowman. Why aren't they coming back? Is it just well, it can't be a pandemic thing anymore. Why is that not happening, instead of just having matches against the established stars week after week after week?
Well, I know for a while, it's the last year and a half, it's because they wanted to limit the amount of people in the Thunderdome because of COVID, and that's completely understandable. Yeah. But you also have 100 people on your roster that you have fired over the last year. Like, there were so many people to make use of. That's why, like, I'll say, hey, they need to have somebody else challenge for the women's tag titles, and somebody will say, who? They don't have anybody. They got hundreds of people, and again, they script the shows. So they get to decide who goes on a winning streak or not.
Your disdain for Raw has become quite famous.
Oh,
how are you fixing Raw? That's a massive question, but how are you fixing Raw? What are the main bullet points you to do?
It all starts at the top. And when I see people that say, oh, get over it, WWE's been like this forever, wins and losses don't matter. And I said, cool, that's fine if you want to be apathetic about it. I don't. I want the show to be good. And to me, it starts at the top. Champions need to be protected. If champions are protected, so is the title belt that they have. When the title belt they have is protected, so is underneath that. So each person that is working their way up, if they have to win to contend for those titles, each match means more. So that way you've got contender who is a winner, contender who is a winner, they clash, and then face an even bigger winner to find out who the best winner is instead of the least bad loser.
But Sean, as a wrestling fan, how do you not know that, like, if the champion loses on the show before a pay-per-view, there is also a chance they could lose at the pay-per-view, therefore you want to watch?
I don't even know what a champion's contender match is. I saw it and I thought, oh, that's a top contender match. It's just a new name for it. No, it's not. It just means it's just a non-title match. That's all it is.
Yeah. One day we'll know the real reason why just repetitive matches happen over and over and over again. And I can't wait for that day because it's utterly baffling. I remember that stat that came out a while ago that compared sort of NXT to Raw to SmackDown to AEW and the percentages of repetitive matches that on there. And that blew my mind. It blew my mind, so did it. Blow yours as well?
It blew my mind that it got this far. It didn't blow my mind when I saw the numbers because I watched the shows, unfortunately. But yeah, I also have people that are like, which, I mean, this could kind of tie into the things I hate. They're like, why don't you stop watching it if you hate it so much? I would rather cover bad wrestling than do anything else. Like, I love covering wrestling, good, bad, or indifferent. It's just, I would really like it to be better. And when I see stuff like the Roman Reigns storyline, I'm like, see, it can be really good. Your champion can be protected. And then when you have a Rey Mysterio pop up, people are like, man, we want to see him beat up Roman Reigns.
Yeah, I'm going to be that guy who says, oh, it was better during the Attitude Era and whatnot. But everybody had a story up and down the card. Why has that gone away?
Laziness. That's just it. Laziness. At this point, I've been given so many like excuses for it that I just think it's laziness.
What are some of the excuses you've been given?
Well, first off, they'll try to tell me, oh, well, they are. Look at Apollo and Big E. They've been in a long-term feud. And I'm like, no, they haven't. They've just been put in matches every single week. That's not like a long-term feud. It's not a best of 7. It's not anything like that. And I will have people in the company. I had somebody in the company after Bray Wyatt get fired say to me, at least you all will have something to complain about. And I said, like we've got any shortage of it, pal. And I was like, that's a terrible thing to say about a contemporary losing their job. And also, like, it's baffling to me. There are a lot of people in the company or any given company, whether it be TNA a few years ago, WWE now, any number of places that know their issues. Then there will be some people that talk and you're like, so you're part of the reason why they think this is normal and they think this is what we want to see.
Is there anyone in WWE who you have spoken to personally that enjoys working there? Because
oh yeah,
the trope of like I've escaped prison, the shackles are off, etc., etc. It's becoming a bit tired now, and that's a sad thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there are definitely a few, and there are a few that definitely did a lot more a few months ago before now. But there are a few, yeah. But almost everybody realizes there's some pretty clear issues there that should be rectified.
Yeah, but there we go. We've got a 2-for-1 special. We've got repetitive matches, and we have lazy book, and they've gone straight down to hell for the rest of eternity. I need to ask you, by the way, because Denise Salcedo really struggled with my pronunciation of the word booking in my Geordie accent. Are you finding it okay?
Yeah, considering the way that she pronounces some things. She calls sitcoms, and that was quite the discourse on our show. Yeah, I think maybe she shouldn't throw stones in her glass house.
She got two things confused there. That sounds like very different things.
Yes, it was.
So, Sean, your third offering, please, to go down to hell.
It's one that we haven't seen as much. All You People promos. We haven't seen it as much since the pandemic. it's one of the silver linings. I think we only saw really one, and it was maybe Carmella upon her return in the Thunderdome. Now we're seeing it a lot more, but I think it's just so lazy to be like, all you people are the reason I did this, instead of coming up with literally anything else creative.
To the best of your knowledge, what is the creative process in WWE? Because how are these promos so uninspired all the time?
Well, writers write them and script them verbatim. There are some that kind of disregard the script and they'll just do their own thing. But as far as like pitching creative stories, from what I understand, the team pitches to Bruce Pritchard pitches to Vince McMahon. At least during the pandemic, that seems to be the way that it went, because Vince wants to be a little more isolated than usual because of the nature of this and him being a 70-something-year-old man, which is understandable. But there's very little time to workshop these things because the scripts get in so late in general. So it's become a lot less back and forth of late, from what I understand.
And in your opinion, why don't they just write the shows a bit earlier in the week before so they have more time to sort things out and make it better?
Well, in the Thunderdome, they didn't do it because they knew they were going to be there from 8 a.m. to midnight anyway, doing retapes and all this stuff. Like, there were so many people during the pandemic that were like, I cannot wait to get out of here, not for personal safety, but so we don't do 16-hour days and reshoot Otis and Baron Corbin doing a spine buster 6 times. Like, when 5 of them look good. There's just so many situations like that changed during the pandemic. And fortunately, when they went live, kind of adjusted things and the scripting changed a little bit more.
Who was that I was listening to recently who said was it Lana maybe on Talk Is Jericho, saying she was in the Thunderdome for 16 hours to say a line and then go home again? What's all that about? Yeah.
It's when Vince McMahon realized he could control the editing process. I mean, he spent so many years of his formative years doing that, like taping all day long and taping the next day and taping the next day. He's conditioned for that. Like, you get that muscle memory back, boy, he was ready for it. And unfortunately, that happened a lot. I had a lot of wrestlers that stuck around all day to do nothing, or like 8-9 hours in, they'd get their stuff cut and there was no reason for them to be there that time.
It's got to be infuriating, hasn't it? But going back to that chain of command, sort of up to Vince McMahon, I've listened to Bruce Pritchard's podcast a fair few times, and that guy, sometimes you don't know whether to believe what he's saying or not, is what I'm trying to say. He's quite a creative guy. And I just find it baffling that, like, you know, we talk about uninspired promos and whatnot, how that sort of, like, is down to him, really. Like, people come to him, he goes to Vince. Somewhere along that road, the creativity just leaves that, and I find it weird that with Bruce there, that actually happens. Do you find that weird at all?
Yes, I do. But I mean, also Bruce was of the era of Papa Shango and The Undertaker, and The Undertaker, if debuted tomorrow, probably would not work the way that it did in 1990. I think if 2013 Bray Wyatt debuted tomorrow, it would work just fine because it's rooted in more realism and instead of spooky supernatural stuff. I think they have different philosophies on what works than most modern day fans or potential fans that you can get back. I think a lot of this stuff is rooted in realism. A lot of the best horror movies that are low budget, high return are rooted in realism, things that you could believe could actually happen. There's also a market for supernatural stuff and completely off the wall stuff. But this ain't Annabelle. This is WWE Raw. So, I mean, I can't pretend to get inside their heads about the type of stuff that ends up on TV.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know what else to say about you people promos, but they do just need to go away. That's just
they do,
don't they? So there you go. They've been sent down to hell to rot for the rest of eternity. Sean, your 4th pick, please.
So we talked a little bit about wrestling media earlier. I want to throw one of those. When people say hiding it behind a paywall.
Oh, man.
More people see when I post something on Fightful Select than when I post it on an actual website because they get an immediate notification. So like 3,300 people, and then all the people that they're sharing their account with see it immediately. Also, I don't know if these people have ever heard of a thing called newspapers, but they were quite popular when I was growing up. And I don't know that anybody was like, you're hiding this information. I will never, ever, ever complain about somebody not paying for our service because, again, I've been in a situation where I didn't have the money to do it, or I just didn't want to, but it costs $0 to not complain about it.
I'm going to cut a these people promo, or you people promo. You people who moan at paywalls and stuff like that. How do you think we pay our bills? Do you think YouTube pays millions and millions and millions of pounds for every single video? No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It's really bloody hard. So we need to try and find as many ways as possible as creators and as news sources like yourself, Sean, to try and monetize our stuff and get as many revenue avenues as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Now, there have been times when I felt guilty about getting to do what I love for a job. For a long time, I did. And I think, and there were some people like when I started that because I was like a wrestling fan and I wasn't plugged into the media aspect of it, I like almost resented them because I knew they were making a living doing something that I would have loved to have done. And that's not the case for everybody. Sometimes they're just miserable people. Sometimes they're people that are rooted in actual, genuine concern or something like that. And I get it. Not everybody's going to believe anything or everything that I write. But ultimately, like, we're not doing like this huge, great service, but we ain't hurting anybody either. I'm not going to report about anybody's positive COVID test behind a paywall. I'm not going to report about anybody's pregnancy before they do it. If they got mental health issues, that ain't going behind a paywall, or I'm not reporting it unless they give it to me directly anyway. So, I mean, like, we try to be as harmless as possible, but yeah.
I was going to say, how much of a difference, just to try and help these people realize like how important it is, how much of a difference is it for Fightful to have certain stories go behind a paywall?
It's significant. Like, again, I hated the idea of a paywall.
Everybody does.
Now, yeah, I don't want to do it. I didn't ever want to do it, but I'll have people that will still pop up and say, that's what ads are for. It's like, all right, you know what? I use an ad blocker on my computer. So, and that's because, quite frankly, of some other wrestling websites that...
Was that Vince McMahon?
It was Vince McMahon. Sorry, Vince. I can't talk, pal. Book your show better. But it wasn't like a choice that I wanted to make. It's something that the owner of Fightful wanted to make, and it's been wonderful. During the pandemic, we were able to give everybody on our staff raises. Multiple people got promotions. We were able to hire people. Nobody got cut. Nobody got demoted. Nobody got their pay reduced or anything like that. So I'm at this point, I know a lot of people are subscribing just out of the nature of thank you, we appreciate what you do. And that will never be lost on me, that I get to do this for a job, and we're allowing some other people to do it as well.
Same here, over here at Cultaholic. We never go, you must subscribe to our Patreon page, otherwise we'll come here and hurt you. It's very much appreciated. It's like, we love you all. I don't know what else to say.
Yes.
It honestly does make a huge difference, and it helps us keep the lights on and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, it's Fightful is finally self-sufficient. For a very long time, we operated at loss because we were fortunate enough to have an owner, Jimmy Van, who I do a Wednesday show called The Listen You Boy with. And he was actually a wrestling writer full-time 20 years ago. And when the dot-com bubble burst, he got out of that, made a bunch of money doing something else. And 5 years ago, he wanted to start a wrestling, MMA, and boxing website. And he wanted it to change the way that a lot of things were done. And some of the places that I've worked before, I could kind of see why he wanted to change some things. And for years, we operated at a loss. And if we made a nickel, he was like, who deserves this nickel on the staff? How can we reinvest this? Because he's pretty well set in that regard. And we've been able to run effectively at cost ever since, and then reinvest our profits back into the staff, which is not something that a lot of websites get the benefit of doing. Because I'll have some people that'll be like, oh, you're doing it for the clicks. I haven't looked at our web traffic in probably like 2 years. I don't get paid per click. Nobody on our site gets paid per click or per article or anything like that, unless they're like a column writer or something. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those misconceptions in wrestling media. Not every vertical is the same. Everybody has a different business model.
Exactly. So there we go. Those people have gone straight down to hell forever, to rot for the rest of eternity. Just Sean, your fifth and final offering, please.
Man, I had trouble coming up with one, and I still am, because because it's like, should I do something from wrestling media, from actual wrestling? What do you think? I can come up with one off the cuff.
Do one of each if you want. Don't narrow yourself down.
You
Just anything you want to throw down there.
When people always do the journalist in quotation marks, because I have that in my bio, because I do not consider myself a journalist. I'll never, and maybe I don't do it because of the weird negative connotation for some reason that's associated with the job. But it's like, I interview people and I report stuff, and that's about it. If you want to call that a journalist, whatever. I ain't doing like earth-shattering, world-changing work here, but that's not everything a journalist does. I went to journalism school. I spent way too much money going to journalism school, but I also learned some very valuable things that ended up working really well in my career. So I mean, that's one, because it's I do always get a kick when people put so-called journalist and they put the entire thing in quotations. They put so-called journalist in quotations. And I'm like, are you mocking me or yourself? Because that's not how you use those quotation marks. And you're trying to give me a journalism lesson here.
I'm intrigued. Why do you not consider yourself a journalist? Because what you do, but more than anybody really in the wrestling media scope, is like, that is journalism, what you do.
Maybe just because of the negative connotation around it, I just don't even want to deal with it. I think that's it. Like, maybe I don't like as much of the responsibility that is associated with it, but there is responsibility in what I report. Like, I have to report correct stuff, or otherwise there's no long-term career in this if I report anything or multiple things incorrect.
Yeah, let me tell you, Sean, you definitely are, because people somehow, some way call us clowns here on Cultaholic Wrestling's YouTube channel journalists, and I find that staggering. I haven't got to journalism school myself and seen what that job entails compared to what we clowns do on YouTube over here. So, yeah, you definitely are, and you're the best one around. I'm not ashamed to say that to you right now, but we got one for wrestling as well, or was that just it?
I'll say, I should say ratings discourse, even though it is nice to see something gaining during this era. There's got to be a better way to find out how many people are watching this show than the way that they are now. There's got to be a way. Unfortunately, it's something that we got to report. But I mean, there's such a vast audience. I wish Fight would release the numbers, for the love of God. I wish Ring of Honor would release their digital numbers and all that stuff. They get more accurate numbers because they are owned by a syndication company. And maybe the tribalism associated with that. Like, and I get it. I grew up in the Monday Night War era, but man, some people get real nasty over wrestling opinions. And ultimately, it's wrestling.
It is. It's all wrestling. I saw a guy saying, I think it was Wale, he replied to, saying that he couldn't support AEW because WWE had just been around for longer or something like that, and he couldn't bring himself to switch sides. And I find that amazing. Like, wrestling companies aren't football teams. You can have a favorite wrestling company by all means, but you don't support them like the football teams or anything like that, do you?
I don't personally. I mean, now I get that a lot too. People will be like, oh, I wish you were unbiased covering these shows. And I'm like, well, I'm unbiased when I report the news. There's no bias to subjective entertainment. Either I like it or I don't. There's a major difference there in subjective and objective. I have to be objective when reporting Adam Cole WWE news. So people can think that, oh, well, Vince might think he's a little guy, and Vince, well, you know what? I heard that Vince McMahon liked him an awful lot and was going to make him a good offer. I can't editorialize on that. That's not my place to do that. But if Adam Cole is in a match on Wednesday and I think it's really, really awesome, or Tuesday, I'm going to say, man, that match was really awesome. If it's terrible, I'm going to go, I think it's terrible. And nobody is like owes me to listen to that and follow that opinion. Like, that's not what I asked, but you can cover subjective entertainment and objective news at the same time and separate them.
It is unprecedented, though, in most things, isn't it? Because maybe film's the parallel there, because obviously film reviewers review the films, but then I guess they might break the news as well. I don't know how that works in that sphere, but I guess that's a sort of parallel. And it might be sort of difficult for people to wrap their head around, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people who cover there are people that cover reality shows full time, people who cover Big Brother itself full time. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of different parallels we could probably draw. It's just, I don't expect those worlds to necessarily collide, to collaborate. That's like more of a chance thing. They happen to run into somebody and they're like, oh, you cover wrestling? I cover this. Let's compare and contrast.
And I guess going back to the ratings thing, is the worst thing that AEW has brought about the constant talk about demographics and stuff like that? Because before, it was mentioned from time to time wherever you looked on certain places and whatnot, but ever since AEW's come about, and I know Chris Jericho sort of feeds into it with a demo god and all that stuff, and it's funny and all that stuff, but I'm getting sick of hearing about demographics. I really am.
Well, it's important to advertisers because they want to target that demographic because that's who spends money on their product. But for years and years and years, WWE did not make the money they deserved because there was the perception that wrestling fans were poor and didn't spend money on things. So like when WWE will do record low viewership and I'll say the show is bad, we'll have people that say, oh, well, they're making more money than ever. And it's like, yeah, but they should have been making huge money like this for decades before. And then people will say, oh, so you're admitting. No, I'm admitting that they were underpaid because of a totally bad perception that wrestling fans were poor. And Cultaholic, Fightful, all these places that are able to provide jobs within the industry have shown wrestling fans are willing to invest in something that they enjoy and that they can connect with and all that. And advertisers finally were able to see that. So, I mean, that's going to really help out AEW if they continue to climb and climb and climb over the next few years. So we'll be talking about them getting, instead of like however much they got paid by Warner Media, we're going to be talking about them getting paid a whole lot more because of those demographics if they keep surpassing Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. But I do kind of like the tongue-in-cheek stuff. I think it's funny that Chris Jericho calls himself the demo god when he's not in the demo himself.
As long as that's as far as it goes. Because when people use it like, oh, AEW's bad because they're not performing as well in whatever demographic, but, you know, WWE are also performing bad in that demographic, that's just tiresome. It's so boring.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like the tribalism. And again, that ties into the subjective thing. And people will go, oh, well, you like AEW a lot more. Yeah, I do. It's a better show. I enjoy it more. But it doesn't necessarily, I don't want WWE to fail. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help Ross. That doesn't help anybody that covers wrestling. Like I would love for WWE to be at its hottest point right now.
Everybody would. That's the thing. When we're always having a go at WWE, it's because deep down we want it to be good, don't we? That's just when you're reviewing any show, you always want to think it's going to be the best thing possible, but rarely these days it is.
And that's the frustrating point, is because you can see so many aspects of WWE over the last couple of years where they have put in that effort and they have done something special. And you're like, most, if not all of the show could be like that if they tried.
But they don't. And that's a shame.
They don't.
The Nielsen TV ratings, by the way, do you know more about that than me? I guess you do. Is that not an outdated way to look at TV ratings these days?
Sort of. I mean, I think it was always kind of outdated, quite frankly. But there are a lot of people that are like, oh, what about cord cutters? What about streamers? They take Hulu and YouTube TV and all those things into consideration, for sure. It's more of a comparative thing. And I mean, if you've got YouTube TV, then you've got the option for Nielsen. Like, it's not just like Nielsen selecting you like they did in the 50s and 60s and sending you a box. Like, everybody that has YouTube TV has the option to be a Nielsen home. So I think that is a little bit more, I think it's actually more accurate now than it ever used to be because of streaming. Meanwhile, there are a whole lot of people that aren't necessarily informed that think that for some reason those aren't counted. I mean, I'll see people, like when I bring up numbers from 2016, 2015, people will say, yeah, but a lot more people are streaming now. And I'm thinking, the internet existed in 2015. It was around. Like, that's the WWE, like that's the WWE network era. Like, that all existed. But we do have, I think it's more accurate now than it used to be in the 80s and 90s.
That's so interesting, because I always just, my perception of it just being a complete outsider who knows nothing. It's just that with more people not watching stuff live, because you don't have to, because you can record your TV and watch it on YouTube and stuff. Maybe they were less accurate than they would be in the past.
Sure, and that is a real thing. I mean, I watch more stuff on DVR and binge watch stuff way more than I used to. And I would love to see the DVR numbers, the replay numbers, and all that stuff. ultimately the advertisers do not care about those numbers because they know that people are going to skip through the commercials. So the original live number it should be way more important to advertisers than it is to you, I, anybody else. Well, I mean, maybe us, because we're going to be reporting on these deals and the financials associated. But to fans, I would actually say that the DVR numbers should be more important if they're talking about who's interested in the show and they don't really care about the financial aspect of it.
There we go. We've come to the end, Sean. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a lovely conversation.
It has been. I'm so glad we finally got to do it. I mean, yeah, I'm very happy about this. People hit me up about it all the time, and I was like, you know what? I would love to do that.
Thank you so much for your time. Anything to plug before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your day?
Yeah, Fightful.com is where we post all of our news, but FightfulSelect.com is where you can get exclusive news. Dare I say we break more stories than anybody else. Every single day we have exclusive news up there.
You do.
So that would
you really do.
So that would mean an awful lot if you guys would subscribe there. That's our lifeblood. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Fightful, and we have a Twitch. Please check that out as well. But every Monday, right after Raw, Tuesday after NXT, Wednesday after AEW, and then Friday after AEW and SmackDown, we're live and for every pay-per-view. And Denise Salcedo is over there an awful lot. If you guys hate me, but you like Denise, there you go.
She was on Straight to Hell recently too, so go and watch that as well before you go and check out all the Fightful stuff.
I'm trying to piggyback off of you, Ross. You had Denise on, so I'm like, listen, maybe everybody that hates me and made it somehow tortured themselves to make it to the end of this episode will be like, yeah, but Denise didn't suck as bad, and they'll watch our show.
Hey, there've been 2 fantastic episodes. I can't pick a better one between the 2, honestly.
I mean, I'm surprised you all could fit Denise's big ass head in the shot, but you know what? You all did it. That's why you all are good at what you do.
Proper zoom out. But there we go. That's the end of Straight to Hell. Sean Ross Sapp, thank you so much for your time. I've been Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic Wrestling, and we'll see you next time.